Hi, this is kind of a spur of the moment video. I hadn't planned it in advance, but some things have come to mind that I need to share, that I want to share, particularly with my trainees, the people that I'm training to use my techniques in giving other people sessions successfully. That's what the points I'm going to bring up are most especially and specifically for. But if you're a client or you might want to be a client or find out more, this will be very explanatory and I think enlightening. So here goes. I just have this some notes here under tips. First thing about conversation, about speaking during a session. If you're giving somebody else a session, this is something I realized a long time ago. When you have your client answering a question, looking into his mind, things are coming up, or processing feelings. As long as that person isn't looking to make eye contact with you, they're looking away, they're processing, they're thinking, things are coming to mind, they're digesting. That's what's going on. That's why they're not looking at you. And when they're ready for you to address them again with a question or an instruction, they will look up at you. So never interrupt the person's processing, their own train of thought while they're looking away. And you should also make it known to your clients, particularly during the spiritual digestion technique, but any technique, anything in a session, that your client should not feel obligated to fill the silence with talking. So the fact that I'm giving you a session doesn't mean that we always have to be engaged in conversation. That is very detrimental when you're actually processing something. It's distracting. So if you're my client and you're in the process of things are coming up for you, you're noticing them, you're having feelings arise, never feel obligated to interrupt your own process because you feel like you're holding me up and I'm waiting for you to say something. That is never the case. And if you're one of my trainees, understand that's part of your obligation and your commitment. And the way to properly conduct your session is to make sure your client knows this, that they should feel perfectly at ease, not speaking and allowing silence to be while they're in their mind processing something. And they should not feel at all pressured or obligated to interrupt their own thought process because they have the idea that you're keeping them waiting. There's no such thing. In the session, if I'm conducting the session or if whoever's conducting the session, the attitude and what's actually going on is, I'm with you. I'm getting a lot of what you're feeling. I understand what's happening. Things are arising through you, and you need to allow these things to arise through you and not have your attention distracted or diverted because you're in a session and there's somebody sitting in front of you. That time when nobody's speaking is the time when something meaningful is happening. So don't interrupt it. If you're giving the session, when your client is ready, when they've completed that process and can now be here with you, they will look you in the eye. They may say something, or they may just look to you for you to say something. But until your client makes contact with you, you're there with them. You're understanding, and you're encouraging them to be comfortable sitting in whatever they're sitting in and have the process take place and not feel like it's an awkward silence. Nothing awkward about it. There's an understanding that something's going on and we're both participating by being here for it. Okay. As I said, this is all things that have just come to mind, kind of spur of the moment. And there's no time like the present. It takes on much greater dimension in a spiritual or processing context. The present is everything. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point that I want you to understand, if you're somebody I'm training, is you need to be thoroughly engaged with the person in front of you. You can't be focused or worried about what your script, about what you're supposed to say or ask next. Okay? Because if that happens many times, the person receiving the processing in the process is going to go through material and actually come up with information and with answers to questions that you haven't gotten to ask them yet. That happens quite a bit. And when the person is expressing something that is in fact an answer to the next question or two you would ask. And if you just go ahead and ask that next question anyway, simply because it's number 3 and you already asked number 2, then you're not fully engaged with the client. They've just answered that with what they've said. At the very least, if you think they may have more to express in answer to the question, acknowledge, you actually just expressed what is an answer to what I would ask next. You've already gone there. But just in case there may be more, the question would be blah, blah, blah. And, if it seems appropriate to check that there might be more in answer to the question. Often, there will be no need to ask question number 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is. If you're paying attention and saw that what they just expressed shows you they've already made that step to what they would notice and come to understand and feel from what you would ask or say next. That's already been accomplished. So it's very important that you're thoroughly engaged with the person, with the individual, and you pick up on that, okay? Because if you ask them a question that they've essentially just answered, then it's going to get awkward. It's going to get a little choppy for that person, though they're not likely to say it, but they're feeling like, you really didn't listen to me because I just answered that, or something like that. That's going to be what they're going to naturally notice if you've, failed to show that you understand they've already asked that. And, if you ask them a question they've essentially just answered, then you've made it obvious that you're not present enough with the client. So be engaged, be present with the client. That is the most important thing. Okay. Next item. A lot of times, particularly with doing the spiritual digestion technique, the person is actually spiritually digesting a feeling, and it's sort of a gradual process. That anxiety decreases. It decreases. Now, when people use my book, which is meant for a person to use by themselves, they're not likely to process as deeply. It's still very useful, but it's not complete, because I noticed people have a tendency to say, okay, that's better. I can stop here. It's better. But it's not complete. The process is not complete. There's still some of that feeling as yet unprocessed, that anxiety or that fear or shock or whatever we're in the midst of processing. And if the person says something like, oh, it's much better now, they're not saying it's gone. They're saying it's much better now. You have to go by what they're expressing. Sometimes those words can mean that they've completely processed it, depending on how they say it. So again, it's a matter of being engaged in this. But the point here is that sometimes, very frequently, especially with newer clients, they'll have a tendency to kind of let it go at not being completely gone. Well, for one thing, they're pleased that it's diminished. They're kind of taking a moral victory on that. But also, people often have a tendency to feel like, how long do I have to do this kind of a thing going on? And it's your responsibility in conducting the session to get them all the way through it. One sign that a person is advancing through the process but isn't complete is that they say something like, well, now I will look at it this way when that happens. Now I'll understand it to be this when that's going on. Or, this is what I can do. Now I know what to do when this problem arises. I can handle it better. Handle it, okay? Any such statement is expressing clearly that there's still something that's a problem for them there. It's not fully processed. When it is fully digested, the attitude would be more like they don't need a solution. They don't need to come up with a way of dealing with it, or a way of thinking about it, or a way of looking at it. Okay? Because that is, and it's still tempting to solve something. When it's fully processed, it's more like there's nothing to solve. There's no issue there. They don't need to create a system or a method or a habit around the problem, because there's no problem they need to have a solution for anymore. And that's when the process is complete, and not before then. And that's how we work. So if it happens in a session, you don't want to marginalize what they've already accomplished. You don't want to be invalidative about this. So, well, great, we're making good progress. And you can explain, as I often do in sessions, okay, we're going to take this all the way. When this is complete, you won't be thinking in terms of how you're going to solve this in the future, because there won't be a feeling that there's something you need to solve anymore. And that's when we're going to be done with this. It's perfectly good and okay to say that. Of course, say that in your own words. I don't expect, or desire anybody I train to be obsessed with saying things in my language, in my words verbatim. You've got to make it your own, and what's appropriate in that moment between you and the particular person in front of you in that particular moment. You've got to be live and present and engaged. So how you say something is going to be you finding your own voice, comfortable in your own skin, and being present to express whatever you're expressing in a natural and optimal way. Okay? And often the next thing and the final thing is, it often happens with these sessions when there's a huge shift, a big spiritual liberation, where something that had been holding the person down, affecting them with an undesirable feeling or attitude, is just such a feeling of a weight no longer there, an effort and a struggle no longer there. I mean, you could say their environment, their space, their mind opens up, and it feels so different. There's a transition going on. There's a gradual stepping out into the world from a dark room, that's one way of saying it. And that feeling won't completely flower and settle out in that moment. When a person hits that point in a session, you're done with the session. The point is, the session can end, but not the processing. There's a certain point where it's happening all on its own. And to hold the person in the session looking at you and answering questions or just being there is detrimental, because it's a distraction. And after this happening once or twice or three times, this will be very apparent to you. You'll understand, you'll know when that's happening. So often I will say to the client, one of my clients uses the phrase, "I'm blissed out." Wonderful feeling. It's just a light, happy, wondrous feeling, and it's something that there's change still happening. It's like, wow, I feel like I'm somewhere different, and you are, and this will take however long it takes to complete. And I will tell the person, great, you know what, the session will end now, but this process will continue for you. I clearly recognize that for you to have to sit in front of me and look at me and have any attention on me is only getting in the way of what's already happening for you, all on its own, that doesn't require any further engagement between us right now. I get it. So we'll end the session. I will always say, is there anything else you'd like to express or ask about before we end the session itself, and give them that opportunity. And then, okay, that being said, take the time you need, and I'll see you in the next session. And just let them go on their way. They don't need any special instructions. They don't need to be told, don't think about anything else. Stay focused on this. That's completely unnecessary. The process is automatic at that point, and it will complete and settle out, and they'll sort of be reoriented to being more present, more relaxed, more comfortable, more themselves, and more interested in and appreciative of their life and their environment. So again, the session ends. That doesn't mean the process has ended. And it's important to recognize that and not try to push the person past it. Hold them in the session, go on to anything else, or in any way demand their presence or their attention with you. So those are the tips I wanted to bring up for today. And if you're somebody who's had sessions with me, you probably will be familiar, find this familiar. You may find it also, oh, that explains why we do it the way we do it. That makes perfect sense. And if you're somebody who hasn't had a session or training from me, well, now you kind of have stepped into an understanding of what goes on and kind of have an idea of how it goes and what to expect. You can always reach me through my website, dexsessions.com. And thanks for your attention.